Okay, so I've opened up our textbook and found chapter 9, which is all about forms. And previous to this screencast, I went through and I highlighted some of the discussions in this chapter. So right now I'm going to scroll through that, find those highlights, and discuss this chapter in terms of our Project 6. So as I mentioned, this is all about forms. And as we saw from the very quick demonstration of our contact form, we have obviously a button for our submit, some input fields, a drop-down menu, as well as some radio buttons. So we have a fairly nice set of different things inside a form that you might find and have to work with. The big thing that is new to us is having to worry about the server. And here she's shown a little diagram of an information being put into a form and then sent to the server. This application running on the server takes the information and does something with it. In our case, it's very similar. This picture is very similar to what Netlify does. So the first thing that we have to do in terms of HTML is create a form element using the form tags. And if I just read the highlighted portion here, the form element is a container for all the content of the form, including some number of form controls, such as text entry fields and buttons. It may also contain block elements like an H1P and lists, for example. However, it may not contain another form. And this is very important. It says, be careful not to nest form elements or allow them to overlap. A form element must be closed before the next one begins. So it's very difficult to see exactly what is written here. So I'm actually going to pop open VS Code. I have no idea what it's going to show. I have no idea what that is. I'll save that. Close that folder. Open a new folder just for a demo. So I'm going to say P6 form demo. Create a quick index.html file. Remember, exclamation point will create a document for us. And actually, this includes the document. So I'm just going to copy that whole thing and replace all of this with that. We've got some strange character there. Right click, format document with beautify, and get rid of that funky character. So now if I save this, I can go open this in Live Server. And there is her demonstration or her example form. Okay. So right now we should understand what an action does, but when we actually implement what Netlify tells us to do, we're going to do something slightly different. And that's because Netlify at the point of deploy, finds the forms that we have for it, and it makes changes in our form. But normally what we would have is an action as part of the form, and that tells the server what it should do with that form. And as you can see here, there are a number of different things that the server could be doing. And since we're front end and this is all back end, we can just treat it like a magic black box that just does the right thing for us. The method, if you notice, if we go back quickly to this form, it also includes a method. And typically the method will either be a post or a get. And you should read here the differences between the get and the post methods. Let me just open Netlify forms. And here is their example of a contact form. And you'll notice that they are using a post method with that. So I'm going to actually copy this code and put a horizontal rule. And put that in there and save that. So now we have two examples of a form. The first one is this mailing list sign up, and the second one is the example that Netlify has given us. And it's very important to understand that we get default styling on all of the elements inside a form, but typically we want to restyle because the styling is fairly ugly and not necessarily terribly accessible. So that's why we have so much CSS with this project. And instead of giving it to you through a screencast and having you type all of that CSS in, I'm giving you the CSS and then explaining to you what the CSS does. So we're using the post method. And then everything else inside that form are called controls, form controls. Again, one of the important aspects of a form obviously is collecting information and then providing whatever on the back end needs that information. And we do that with name value pairs. So if you'll notice here, we have to have things that are named. We do that inside the tag. And then the information that we get from our visitor is the value for that name. So the way she discusses it, she calls that variables, which in fact they really are. So in looking at, for project 6, the form controls that we have inside our contact form, we have text entry controls, we have radio buttons, and a pull down. Some of these more exotic controls like the date picker, the color picker, we're not really going to be using, but even within the work that we've done, we've actually seen some of these. For example, the color picker, we've actually seen inside of our developer tools. So we have, we're going to be having an input and a text area. Let me bring up the form again. So these are inputs for text. They're typically single lines. Then if we need multi-line input for text, we have a text area that we can make use of. So the tags are input type equals text, and then we have input type, is that right? Not quite sure. There we go, text area. So we're going to use an input type text for single lines and text area for multi-line. Text isn't the only thing we can use on a single line. And here we have specialized text entry fields. We've all been, we all have experience with typing in passwords. And you'll notice that most times the passwords, the letters that we're typing show up as stars. So in a case like that, we're actually seeing an input with type equals password. The one that we're using in our contact form is an input where the type is equal to email. And we're also doing the type equals tel for telephone number. And we can actually see this since it'll be part of the form. You can't really do it on a device like this, but if you have a mobile device and you enter the telephone number, you'll get a keypad for that type of entry. And the same with the email. You'll notice that for an email, you get a keypad that is for that type of entry. In this case, you have an @ symbol there. We're not using input with type submit. Instead, we're using an actual button, which is down here. And do give some time to looking at this link. It's a very good link. Explaining the use of a button. As we can see, button is a semantic element, and we prefer to use semantic elements when we can. And we get some nice flexibility with the use of buttons. We can actually put different things inside a button element to make it kind of snazzy. Okay. Scrolling right along. Here's our radio buttons that we need to worry about. And the big thing on a radio button and the way that they work is you have to have the same name for multiple input tags. So if we look at this, if we were to look at the code, which we will, these two radio buttons share the same name, so that when we actually do the submit or send, only one of these values will be attached to that particular name. That's the big thing about radio buttons, as we all know, is you can only have one that's active at any one time, whereas checkboxes, you can have many. So that's all controlled, both through the type and through the use of name. Okay, we have a menu here with selections. We have 4 selections, the default plus mobile, work, and phone. And so in our code, we're going to see the select element, and inside the select element, we're going to have options that go along with that. And as it says here, that creates a drop, excuse me, a drop-down menu. Again, we can have some fairly fancy input types. File control would actually allow us to upload a file. Again, here are some of the fancier types of input form controls. I'm going to scroll through this relatively fast. Really not going to be tested on these fancier ones. You can just know that they exist. All right, I'm going to stop here, and when I come back, excuse me, when I come back, I'm going to talk about accessibility.